Hooking, the Human Anomaly. A story by user themonkeyzen. Tarot 78 of Hive Diru was quite enamored with the captain who was showing V around her ship. The bipedal species had become a welcome addition to the hive mind's galactic knowledge, and they were eagerly getting their manipulators on any information about the species they could. What they found was relatively harmless, although not far off from other species the hive mind had encountered. Average size, 3 primary color receptors, and 10 digits on each hand and foot. They were a rather sturdy folk due to their musculature, but not outside of the galactic norm for a few other species. They didn't come close to the rumanoid strength, of course. Few species did. Although what was more apparent was their adaptability, as well as their endurance. That had yet to be tested by the hive's great minds, but they had already learned much from their tests of endurance against others of their species. Captain Falks of the Federated Space Command was showing their first contact species the workings and intricacies of the human spacecraft. As far as classified information and security doctrine allowed, of course. While she wasn't pleased that the first contact humanity had made was with a species that was basically a cross between a pillbug and a praying mantis, she had been relieved to find out that though a hive mind, they were relatively peaceful and had a symbiotic relationship with a smaller species from their planet, which resembled a 6-legged dog more than anything. Although there was no nose to speak of, and it looked like someone had put a grasshopper's furred face in place of a dog's. Not to mention the large pupilless eyes. What she'd learned about them was helping her learn the big bug's mannerisms, and how its several, if shocking, reactions or movements weren't in fact hostile, but expressions of excitement, shock, or disgust, as they have no dermal tissue to express themselves naturally. "We are most grateful for your tour, although we are most unhappy it is coming to a close," expressed the multi-legged sentient bug to her side. The upper unarmored half moving its quite dexterous triple-jointed arms in a sort of sign language to help emphasize its unhappiness. Although she hadn't exactly been enjoying the way the things seemed to constantly spastically react to their engineering or other more mundane parts of the ship, she had been enjoying watching the little Borka that had up until now been running around chittering at just about everything. Despite the lack of a proper wagging tail, it had reminded her of a family dog from back home. "It's been an honor to have you aboard my ship as your first human vessel." She eyed the sleeping form of the armored lower half of the turret. "Your Bella Tian was most comical." It took a moment to process the word through the translator. Then it waved its arm in a quick circle at chest level. "I am pleased. Your crew seemed most pleased with his presence." She chuckled. "We humans have similar beasties." She gestured to the galley. "We call them dogs." While smell receptors were quite standard among galactic species, Tarot 78 had to admit that his species were not quite as acute as the average sentient. Even so, he picked up the scent wafting through the air. "We are in the galley?" It had heard the word spoken earlier, but had no understanding. There was no equivalent among the 4 spacefaring races. "Yes, I thought we'd have a meal before saying goodbye." Using its lower mandibles, the smaller and more dexterous ones, Tarot 78 pulled out a meal packet. "I have brought sustenance to aid in my continued function." Although from the look on the captain's face, his translator told him that it was not a belief held by the mammalian species. I thought you'd like to try something else. I hear that we have a unique way of preparing food among the other races." Gesturing to a table that had apparently been reserved, a modified cot had been set aside for the turret. "I would like you to try some. Cook has been working for weeks trying to prepare something with the nutritional requirements you provided." Taking its seat, Tarot 78 ruminated on what he had learned via the hive mind about human habits concerning food. They viewed it as a habitual ritual, requiring 3 squares a day as they called it. Although not all food came in square form. Commonly held in smaller domiciles, as they observed smaller hives, like the rumanoids for early growth and personal companionship. Their spawnlings were also quite voracious when they reached a stage called teenage years, consuming large quantities of food to aid their explosive growth through puberty. an event similar to the fourth shedding his species enjoyed before reaching maturity. We've also made something for your little guy as well. Terrat 78 made 2 concentric circles with his manipulators. Joyous, it will be most pleased. Turning its body around, something of which the assorted and in some cases staring humans seemed to take offense or disgust to, he picked up his symbiotic companion and turned back around and petted it awake. Just 78, wake up, little friend. The small creature came to life, much like a cat would, stretching out its 6 furry paws and then clicking its mouth in rapid succession. The captain was setting down a piece of cloth with what appeared to be eating implements on them, and then put their hands together and said a small prayer, after 2 ceramic discs with hot food were placed before them. Religion. Terrat 78 knew this phenomenon well. The hive also practiced daily prayer to the greatest of the hive, the Old One. The one who spawned the first hive, and the most honored and revered of all the hive to this rotation. Although it was not certain how it should proceed while the captain said her words, he was distracted as a crew member set a disc down below, indicating her Jard's place at the table. Setting Jard 78 down, he looked back at the disc as the captain picked up her implements, and stated in a seemingly different language than the English that she'd been speaking. Bon appetit, and began consuming. Not knowing what was in front of it, Terrat 78 took a moment to study the contents of the ceramic disc. Being primarily vegetarian, the Terrat was pleased that it could recognize leafy greens and stalks from various plants. Although not native to its diet, he put trust in the human's generosity and this cook's ability not to poison itself. Picking up a stalk with a 3-pronged hand, it devoured it in quick, efficient bites. It had no eyes like the humans did, nor any facial features with which they seemed to express with subconsciously, so its free manipulator made rapid circular patterns to express extreme joy. You have never tasted something so wonderful. The captain, who was eating a meat-based meal, with some fluffy clouds next to it, smiled and swallowed her portion. It's called asparagus, pan-fried and salted. Even I can make that. And she kept her eyes on him while she continued eating. Not exactly knowing what decorum is, or how to act at a dinner table, it was akin to sitting across from her niece when she was 2. Although there was less flung food, as it was hastily devoured by hand with an enthusiasm a child might express with candy. Diplomatically, she hid her laughter by eating her steak. And this substance? Inquired the Terrat, holding up the aforementioned bowl of soup. Borscht. Cook likes to switch what kind he makes. Oh, and that's pasta. The spiral things inside it. Though it was colorful and apparently delicious, as its small but efficient mouth made short work of it, tipping the bowl carefully as to not spill it on its clothing. This went on throughout the meal. Asparagus, borscht, small fruit salad, and finally the crowning achievement to cook's work was the vegetable loaf. This, however, took the Terrat by mute shock, allowing the captain to take a moment to check on the Belletienne below. While responsible for cleaning the shell and underbelly of the Terrats, as well as providing soothing and sterile antiseptic in their saliva for their wounds, they were also cared for as pets by the large sentient bugs, and one of them is rarely seen without one around, making for an interesting ship life as she is to understand it. This one, however, was passed out on its stomach, having ravished its plate like any dog would at home, apparently enjoying sausages and berries like the information packet said it would. Back up on the table, Terrat 78, and she was still having trouble thinking of using a species name as its individual name followed by a number, was looking at the loaf with a forlorn look. Although that may have been her projecting emotions a human would feel onto its rigid facial structure. Something wrong? Looking up to her, the Terrat gave what was obviously a questioning gesture, a quick angle with a slice through it. It seemed, after the rather explosively flavorful meal, it wasn't quick to eat what looked like the nutrient block it had brought with it. It's called a vegetable loaf. I'm told it's quite tasty. Although it seemed swayed by the words, it still gingerly picked up a piece and brought it to its mouth. Watching a Terrat eat was a study on how bugs ate as well, although on a much larger scale. It had no mouth like humans, but small little mandibles on each side, cutting the food like a pair of scissors before pulling it in with its inner pincers. Although the effect was unnerving on multiple levels, it was also intriguing to the point where on several occasions she'd already caught herself staring. "We are impressed," making more circles. "We were unaware the nutrient blocks could produce such flavor." Seemingly making a windmill with its one arm to indicate continued enjoyment before using that same one to aid in its eating. Wiping her mouth. Quick would probably agree from what we've seen of those things. Highly efficient for calories, but with no taste to speak of. She had thought of the other species, some of whom digested their meals slowly over time, in a sort of acidic gelatinous stomach, and had no taste buds to speak of, while others preferred to eat like the animals did, with basic raw meat and fruits. How they had not mastered basic cooking was beyond her. Tarot 78 was quite sated by the time V had finished its meal. Its mind was still categorizing the new tastes it had encountered. It had to stop thinking altogether to give its mind time to absorb the new impact of cooking. Something it had only done twice before in its 90 interim cycles. "Well, how was your first actual meal?" inquired the captain, thanking the sailor who had come to clean their table, although he noted theirs was the only one receiving such service. So V thanked the sailor as well, and on behalf of his jart. Rubbing its thorax quite proudly, it stated, "I hope it will not be my last." If you're new here, welcome aboard. Check out the description for the story, and join the Discord if you like. Consider supporting the channel and the author as well. It's a dangerous world out there, but remember to be brave and look up to seek the stars.